We're going to go back to the UV texture editor and talk about several specialized tools you can apply to UVs to help clean up the UV texture space. And those involve the normalization of the UVs and the relaxation of the UVs. So for this example, I have a polygon ear, and this model is saved out as ear.mb in the Chapter 9 folder in the Working Files directory. So let's take a look at the UVs on this ear. I'll select the ear. It's a single polygon surface, and I'll go to the UV texture editor. And there it is. Now right off the bat, we can see that the UVs do not take up the entire 0 to 1 space. There's a lot of empty space in this area. That might be okay if you had other UV shells you want to move into the area, but in this case I just have the ear. So there's one trick to scale up these UVs to maximize this space, and that's normalize. If I right mouse click and pick UV from the menu and select all the UV points, what I can do is go up to the polygons menu in the UV texture editor and go straight to normalize. If I choose normalize, the UV points are automatically scaled up to fit that space as best as possible. And they'll go all the way up to the edge. You can see at the top and at the left here and at the bottom right. You'll scale that ear all the way up so it fits that entire space. It will never go beyond the valid 0 to 1 area, but at the same time it doesn't distort the original layout. That's a quick trick. Often it's nice to be able to scale up your UVs to fit that space. Again, just select the UVs, go to polygons, and go to normalize. I also want to talk about relaxation. In this case, there's a decent UV layout for the ear. However, there's a lot of overlap. If I scale this window up a little bit bigger, we'll take a closer look. You can see there's a number of areas where the faces are overlapping. For instance, right here at this pit of the ear, along the ridge of the ear, where the ear bends over on itself. This is because this is a convoluted piece of geometry. If I look in the view panel, take a closer look, you can see there's these pits and caves and overlaps and overhangs on this model that's going to make any kind of standard projection, like planar projection, difficult. So I have to do a little bit of editing. In this case, however, there's a tool that allows you to relax UVs to avoid such overhangs and caves. Let's take a look at that. I'll go back to the UV texture editor. What I can do is pick all the UV points again and go up to polygons, go down to relax. Look at the option box in this case. It's important. Relax, option. Here are the options. What I'll try to do is relax the UVs in such a way that overlapping goes away. It basically moves the UVs in the UV texture space and in turn moves the edges and faces. There's a couple different ways that it works. Let's try a default. Right now it says at the top pinning, where it says pin UV border. That's checked. That means that the outer edge of the shell, the outer ring of UVs, is left intact, and all of the UV points within the interior of that shell are moved around. So the overall shape based on the outside loop of UVs is left intact. And that's often good to try to maintain the rough shape of the geometry, or at least the layout in the UV texture editor. Also under other settings, there's edge weights. A couple different ways it tries to relax. One is uniform, one is world space. Uniform attempts to make all the resulting faces in the UV texture space the same size. And this has nothing to do with the original model, it just tries to make them all equal. That can be good in some situations. The other is world space, where it tries to pay attention to the relative size of the faces based on the model in the 3D world space. We'll try that in a second. And there's a number of iterations. Iterations is kind of a strength. The higher the maximum iterations, the more aggressive the relaxation. Let's just try this all at the default first. So I'm just going to hit the apply button, because you can apply this tool more than one time. Hit apply, and instantaneously you'll see that the layout has changed. Now there's still overlap, it's still a bit twisted, but if you continue to apply, eventually it'll work itself out where there's no more overlapping. So now I've moved my camera so we can see, after 5 or 6 applications of the tool, the entire mesh is laid out in the UV texture space such a way there's no overlap any longer. Now it doesn't look as much like an ear as it used to, but at least there's no overlap. Now because I had pin UV border selected, the outer edge is in the same basic place, it's the interior that was moved around. It's almost like a net that was flexed until all the kinks were worked out. So what this will give you is just a better layout for applying textures. you will have less of the model sharing the same texture space. And this way, because it's relaxed, because it's flattened out, every part of that model of the ear will get a unique part of the texture applied to it. I'm going to do undo now so we can see the other options for this tool. Click on the view panel, press Ctrl Z a few times until it goes back to the original layout. And there we're back to the original. And so right now it's on pin UV border. That's the most common way to use it. You can also pin UVs. If you switch to pin UVs, what it does is it either pins the UVs you have selected when you apply the tool, and that could be any group of UVs or UV points, or you can pin unselected. So if you want to select a certain area of UVs, like for instance, maybe this area right here, and make sure those do not move, you would click on pin UVs and say pin selected UVs. The opposite of that would be to pin whatever you don't have selected. They can have both pin UV border and pin UV selected. It's up to you. The pin just makes sure that those particular UV points do not move. I'm going to actually unclick this and just keep pin UV border. We'll go down to edge weights. I mentioned world space tries to maintain the relative size of the faces based on the way the model looks in 3D space in the view panel. So we'll try that. We'll try world space this time and apply that. As I apply that now with world space, it takes longer for it to avoid the overlapping because it's trying to maintain the relative size of all those faces. So you have to apply a few more times before the overlapping goes away. 8, 9, 10 times. And it started to relax to the point we don't really see the edges overlapping so much. Do it a few more times, we'll reselect the UV points. So there's quite a few applications, but the advantage of using the world space is that you can see that some faces are left quite large or others are quite narrow. And this is based on the way the model is originally constructed. In terms of the model has some large faces and some other faces are fairly narrow and skinny. So it tries to maintain that ratio. And now at this point, I can reapply Normalize to have it fill up that UV texture space one more time. There we go. So Normalize and Relax are two ways to tweak your UV layout to make it more useful for texturing.